Welcome, 6th grade, to the 8th and final step of the scientific method, conclusion. So let's just jump right into it. So the scientific method. The scientific method is a set of steps to do an experiment. If you want to do an experiment, you got to follow the scientific method. That's it. It's really that simple. So we started off this year studying observations, then how to make a scientific question, then we answer that scientific question with an inference, then we make a hypothesis, a procedure, then we actually do the experiment, collect the data with data collection, then we have to analyze our data, and then we have our 8th step, conclusion, to wrap it all up. So what is a conclusion? A conclusion is the end of a process, just like writing an essay or doing an experiment. It's just any process. A conclusion is the end. A conclusion is the nice bow on top, the nice frosting on the cake, if you will, to wrap up everything in a nice way. It's just the end of the process. It's the conclusion. So in science, we have 6 parts to a conclusion. And anytime you write an experiment, these parts will be broken up for you, so you don't have to memorize how to write a conclusion in a nice paragraph form. It'll be broken up for you so that you can write a good conclusion paragraph by yourself. So first, we want to restate the scientific question. Then we want to move on to our claim, then our evidence, then our reasoning. You might know this from ELA, claim, evidence, reasoning. Our claim in science is our hypothesis. Our evidence is our data, and our reasoning is just, well, it's the same in ELA. You just have to explain yourself. Then we add 2 little parts, possible errors, or what we call limitations, and possible next experiments. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of these parts. So part 1 is restate the scientific question. We have to remind the reader what we were wondering in the beginning of the experiment. Why did we even start this experiment to begin with? We have to restate the question to remind whoever's reading our experiment. It's like restating the question on an ELA test. So a lot of you do this really nicely on any writing question. You start off with restating the question. That's fantastic writing technique, and we are carrying this on over into science. So part 1, you want to start off your conclusion paragraph by restating the scientific question. Then part 2, you have to make your claim or restate your claim. We kind of already made our claim at the beginning, but we want to make our reader, just remind our reader. Part 2, claim. In science, our claim is our hypothesis. The good thing is that we can change our claim in our conclusion. So in ELA, midway through your essay, you're not going to change your claim. But in science, we can do this fancy little thing and we can change our hypothesis with our evidence. So we want to restate our hypothesis, and then we want to say, was our hypothesis correct or was it incorrect? And if it's incorrect, we can make a new hypothesis, the new claim. So then we have to state our evidence, claim, evidence, reasoning. Our evidence is our data. In our summary of our evidence, we have to put our data into words. It might seem a little redundant or repetitive. This is good practice for other types of essays and write-ups, though. If you are learning how to put a data table into a paragraph form, we want to do that in our evidence. Our evidence is our data. We have to put it into our paragraph form. All right. Then we need to move on to our reasoning. After stating our evidence, we have to explain it. So why was our hypothesis right or wrong? And why is the new hypothesis better? If we have a new hypothesis, we have to explain why our new hypothesis is better. So this reasoning is just stating how does our claim and our evidence connect. Why was our hypothesis correct? Why was it incorrect? Why is our new hypothesis better? All right. Then we want to move on to part number 5, which is our possible errors section. We call possible errors in science limitations. They are things that limited our experiment and our data, and maybe the accuracy of our data. So what went wrong in the experiment? How could your experiment be invalid or inaccurate? If another scientist were to copy this experiment, what should they do differently? So this section is just about stating what you could have done better and what other scientists should do better in order to make the data most accurate so that we can have a fantastic experiment and our findings can be good too. All right, and then the last part of a conclusion is possible next experiments. This is a tricky one for most students. So pretend that you need to be an expert on this experiment and this topic. What would you do next? And note, these are related experiments. A lot of students just put any random experiment, but we want related experiments that we can study after so that we can know more about these materials that we're using, this topic that we're studying. So we want to answer this question: what can we do to study this topic further and make our findings even better, even deeper? And that's what this part is all about. And that is step number 8, the conclusion. This is all done in a paragraph form. You have an example to look at here in the next little quest. So if you are confused, you can always come back to this video or email us if you need help. But that is step number 8, conclusion.